Welcome to today's explainer. All right, imagine this. You are hungry. Like, haven't eaten in 2 days hungry. But you know exactly where the herd is. You tracked them yesterday, you found the prints, you've got the whole route mapped perfectly in your head, and literally all you have to do is get there. And then the sky opens up. It starts pouring. And I don't mean a light drizzle. I'm talking about a heavy, soaking, wind-driven rain that just does not stop. It goes all day, all night, straight into the next morning. You can't hunt. You can't even see the tracks anymore because the mud just washed them away. Moving over that rocky terrain with wet, bare feet, that's a twisted ankle waiting to happen. And out here, a twisted ankle basically means death. The river's rising and, well, you are officially trapped. Today we're going to explore how this exact scenario, a relentless prehistoric rainstorm, didn't just pause human life, but actually forced us to build humanity as we know it. Okay, let's dive into this by looking at how drastically our relationship with the weather has changed over time. Think about it. Today, when you hear rain hitting the window, what do? You brew some coffee, grab a cozy blanket, maybe you fire up Netflix on the couch. For us, rain is just, background noise. It makes us feel calm, maybe a little sleepy. But for a human being 50,000 years ago, that exact same rain, that relaxing sound you fall asleep to, could literally kill you before the storm even passed. It brought the immediate mortal terror of hypothermia, rising flash floods, and, cave leopards. Ancient rain wasn't an inconvenience. It was a total, unmitigated crisis. So here's our prehistoric survival checklist for today. 1. When rain meant death. 2. Priority 1. The fire. 3. The prehistoric workshop. 4. The birth of culture. And finally, 5. The post-rain bounty. Section 1. When rain meant death and those fatal threats. Let's start with the immediate, urgent reality of being caught in the storm. An ancient human trapped by the weather faced 3 fatal threats in rapid succession. First up is the cold. A wet human loses body heat up to 25 times faster than a dry one. In a long rainstorm, even in higher elevations in Africa, temperatures dropping below 50 degrees Fahrenheit could plunge your core temp into hypothermia in a matter of hours. Second, we've got flooding. Caves and rock shelters, they're usually at the base of hillsides or right near rivers. Archaeologists have actually found thick layers of flood sediment inside caves directly on top of where people were living. That means the water rushed in violently, without warning. But the third threat, man, this is the stuff of nightmares. Predators. The exact same rain drove lethal animals into shelter too. In South Africa, they found human remains and large cat remains in the exact same cave layers, complete with puncture marks in the human skulls that perfectly matched leopard teeth. The storm essentially compressed everyone, humans, predators, prey, into the exact same tiny dry spaces. Section 2. Priority 1. The fire and saving the flame. So you're crammed in a cave, you're freezing, and you are absolutely terrified of what might be lurking in the dark with you. In the middle of all that terror, one job mattered more than absolutely anything else. Look, we have archaeological evidence showing humans controlling existing fires going back 400,000 to maybe even 1,000,000 years ago at sites like Quesam Cave and Wonderwork Cave. But creating a new fire from scratch, that was highly, highly unreliable until roughly 40,000 years ago. Controlling a fire and starting one from nothing are 2 entirely different skill sets. For the vast majority of human history, if your fire went out during a storm, you couldn't just casually relight it. The darkness would completely take over. Losing the fire was potentially fatal for the entire group. Because of that immense risk, saving the fire was a meticulous, incredibly high-stakes operation. Let's methodically walk through these steps, and I want you to imagine the extreme focus required by the person whose sole job was keeping that flame alive. Step 1, you have to carefully move the fire deeper into the cave, way back from the rising water. Step 2, you physically shield it from the wind and the spray using whatever you have, animal hides, thick brush. Step 3, you need fuel, right? So you desperately search for dead lower branches from coniferous trees, because those are usually still somewhat dry underneath the canopy. Step 4, you split open soaked logs just to get at the tiny bit of dry wood hidden inside. And finally, step 5, you use birch bark as kindling. Why? Because it contains a highly flammable chemical called Betulin that actually burns even when it's completely soaking wet. You would literally sit there for hours, completely dialed in, feeding it, shielding it, just making sure it didn't die. And this brilliantly illustrates just how universally critical this was. Just consider the fire kit carried by Ötzi the Iceman, the famous frozen mummy found in the Alps. Even just 5,300 years ago, losing your fire was such a serious threat that Ötzi carried dedicated equipment right on his belt. Take a mental picture of tinder fungus. This is a type of woody mushroom that can catch a spark and just smolder inside itself for hours. It was basically a prehistoric biological lighter. He also carried flint, iron pyrite to strike sparks, and extra plant tinder as a backup. Fire was warmth, it was cooked food, it kept the predators away, and as we'll see in a minute, it was the absolute center of social life.
Section 3. The Prehistoric Workshop and Downtime Innovations.
All right, so the fire is safe. You're mostly dry, but it is still just pouring outside. What do you do with all this time? Well, being stuck inside for hours and days on end compounded into a massive technological explosion over the millennia. Just think about the sheer variety of innovations that came from this. 100,000 years ago at Blombo's cave, we see an entire ochre processing workshop, complete with abalone shell mixing bowls. People actually had the time to systematically manufacture pigment. 77,000 years ago at Sibadu Cave, they were arranging comfortable bedding topped with Cape laurel leaves, which act as a natural insect repellent. They had time for pest control. Fast forward to 61,000 years ago, and we start seeing these incredibly delicate bone needles with tiny drilled eyes. You don't make a precision bone needle while you're running from a rhino. You make it when you're sitting perfectly still, near a warm fire, with hours to spare. Then consider the string and rope tools from 52,000 and 35,000 years ago. Making rope is a slow, tedious, highly repetitive task. It requires immense patience. But once it was invented, string changed the world. It allowed us to build traps, tie tools to handles, secure shelters. Bad weather literally gave humanity the exact focused downtime we needed to build our foundational technologies.
Section 4. The Birth of Culture, Art and Stories.
But our ancestors didn't just stop at making tools. Once the practical baseline of survival was met, human beings reached for something higher, and this is where the story takes a truly breathtaking turn. Between roughly 36,000 and 45,000 years ago, we see this absolute explosion of deep cave art at sites like Chauvet, Lascaux, Altamira, and Sulawesi. And these aren't just simple doodles. We are talking about masterpieces, showing detailed anatomy, mid-stride movement, perfect perspective, all drawn entirely from memory. But here is the really crucial point. These paintings are not hanging out at the cave entrances. They're deep underground, sometimes hundreds of meters back through narrow, pitch-black passages where you literally have to crawl on your stomach to get there. The artists had to use tiny animal fat lamps just to see what they were doing. Think about it. Nobody crawls hundreds of meters into a suffocating pitch-black rock tube when the weather is perfect outside and the hunting is good. No way. You do that when you're trapped by a multi-day storm, you've already sharpened all your tools, and there is absolutely nothing left to do but push into the dark and create something beautiful. Now, what's really interesting about this is how the campfire dramatically transformed human interaction. Anthropologist Polly Weissner studied the Jew Huansi Bushman in the Kalahari, and her data shows that during the day, conversations were highly practical. Complaints, land rights, resource management. But at night, gathered around the fire, 80% of the conversation shifted entirely to stories, songs, and ceremonies. The firelight softened faces, it reduced tension, and it created this captive audience. When 15 to 30 people are forced into a confined space by the rain, they don't just sit there and stare at the wall, they talk. The campfire was literally the original social network. And the information shared in that original social network wasn't just idle gossip, it was critical survival data. 7,000 years. That number represents one of the most astonishing facts about human culture. The oldest known oral traditions that have been verified against real geological events are Australian Aboriginal stories describing ancient sea level changes. Those stories have survived for 7,000 years entirely through oral tradition. Just think about the countless rainy days, the thousands upon thousands of campfires required to pass those stories from one generation to the very next, perfectly intact. Captive downtime during bad weather wasn't just dead time. It was absolutely critical knowledge transmission time.
Section 5. The Post-Rain Bounty and the Ecological Advantages.
So, we've survived the immediate threat, we saved the fire, built our tools, and shared our culture. What happens when the skies finally clear? Well, we usually think of a storm as a completely negative event, but the end of the rain brought massive ecological advantages. The storm basically hit the reset button on the food supply. First off, the hunt resumes in perfect conditions. The ground is now soft mud, which means deep, clear, highly detailed animal tracks. Second, those rock depressions near the campsites, they're now overflowing with fresh, clean drinking water. Third, all that moisture triggers an explosive growth of tubers and mushrooms, making foraging incredibly productive. And finally, swarms of termites emerge. Termites are actually one of the most protein-dense foods available in tropical Africa, and after a rain, you don't even need a weapon to hunt them. You just walk up and scoop them up. The ancient humans who used their rainy downtime to rest up, repair their tools, and share knowledge emerged into this post-rain bounty with a massive, decisive advantage over anyone who didn't.
I want to leave you with this final thought. Boredom didn't exist when your survival depends on what you make with your hands in the next few hours. You don't get bored. You get creative. Modern boredom is, in many ways, a total luxury. For our ancestors, being trapped by the weather was the very crucible that forged human ingenuity. Every delicate bone needle, every piece of string, every magnificent cave painting in every ancient myth was born from downtime. So, the next time a heavy storm rolls in and you find yourself trapped inside, maybe don't just instinctively reach for the remote. Ask yourself, how will you use your downtime? What could you create? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, stay curious.